Captain Jake Morrison couldn't sleep. For 3 straight days, the same mysterious signal had been coming through the deep space receivers at Earth's orbital station Nexus 7. Every time he tried to ignore it, something about the transmission made his stomach twist with worry. The space station floated quietly above Earth, its massive communication arrays constantly scanning the darkness between stars. Morrison had been running the station for 8 years, and in all that time he'd never heard anything like this signal. It wasn't just the words that bothered him. It was the desperate tone, like someone screaming for help in their final moments. "Lieutenant Davis, come take another look at this." Morrison called out to his communications officer. Kelly Davis walked over to the main console, her coffee mug still steaming in her hands. She was one of the best translators in the Earth's Navy, specializing in old languages that most people had forgotten. If anyone could make sense of this strange message, it would be her. "Run that translation program one more time," Morrison said, pointing at the flickering display. "I need to be absolutely sure about what we're hearing." Davis set down her coffee and started typing on her keyboard. The computer began processing the alien sounds, breaking them down into patterns and comparing them to thousands of different language databases. After a few minutes, words started appearing on the screen. "Captain, this is definitely ancient standard," Davis said, her voice getting quieter as she read.
"Oh.
"It's an old language that died out thousands of years ago, but someone out there is using it to send a message." She paused and looked up at Morrison. With worried eyes, "They've activated something called a Class Alpha beacon in the Kepler 442 system." Morrison felt his heart start beating faster. "What exactly are they saying?" Davis read from the screen slowly. "They're calling for help, but not just any help. They're specifically asking for the Navy of the Deathworld Sons to come save them." The words hit Morrison like a punch to the gut. During his training at the Naval Academy, he'd studied old theories about ancient emergency beacons scattered across the galaxy. According to the legends, a mysterious alien race had placed these beacons on distant worlds before disappearing completely. The beacons were supposed to be a last resort, only activated when an entire civilization was about to be wiped out. But here's what made Morrison's blood run cold. These beacons weren't meant to call for just anyone. They were designed to summon the most dangerous, most violent military force that could be found. The kind of navy that could fight impossible battles and win. "Get Admiral Brooks on the emergency channel right now," Morrison ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell him the ARC protocol just went active," while Morrison was making his urgent call to Earth's military command. Something completely different was happening 3 star systems away. The Galactic Council, a peaceful organization that tried to keep order among the different alien species, had also picked up the same distress signal, but their translation computers worked differently than Earth's. The Council's machines had never been programmed to understand old human languages. To them, the desperate cry for the Navy of the Deathworld Sons sounded like a simple request for naval assistance. The Council members, sitting in their comfortable meeting chambers, discussed the situation calmly. They decided to send a small group of peacekeeping ships to investigate. Nothing too serious, just a routine mission to help some colonists who were probably having minor troubles. They marked the incident in their official records as minor disturbance, requiring standard intervention, and moved on to other business. The council leaders had no idea that they had just completely misunderstood. It's the most important message in galactic history. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Admiral Brooks was staring at his communication screen in disbelief. Morrison's message had reached him at his office deep underground in the Colorado mountains, where Earth's military leaders planned for threats that might never come. For 300 years, humanity had been building warships and training soldiers for a war they hoped would never happen. Every human child learned about their planet's violent history, the storms, earthquakes, dangerous animals, and constant struggles that had made their species incredibly tough. But now, for the first time, an ancient alien beacon was calling specifically for them. Admiral Tom Brooks walked into the war room buried 3 miles beneath the Rocky Mountains. The massive underground facility had been built during humanity's early space age, when people still worried about nuclear wars destroying everything on the surface. Now, it served as the command center for Earth's greatest secret. The room was huge, with curved walls covered in screens showing star maps, ship locations, and tactical data. Round a large table sat 30 of Earth's most experienced military commanders. These men and women had spent their entire careers preparing for a war that might never come. Brooks was 62 years old, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes from decades of making hard decisions. He'd joined the Navy as a young man, back when humanity was just starting to explore beyond their own solar system. Now, he commanded the largest military force that had ever been assembled, and almost nobody in the galaxy knew it existed. "A seat, everyone," Brooks said as he reached the front of the room. Behind him, a massive holographic display flickered to life, showing thousands of tiny blue dots scattered across space. The commanders looked up in amazement. Even though they all knew about Earth's fleet, seeing it displayed like this was still breathtaking. Over 2,000 warships floated in hidden bases throughout the solar system. Battleships as long as skyscrapers, carriers that could launch hundreds of fighter craft, destroyers built for speed and stealth. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brooks began, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "For 3 centuries, we've been asking ourselves the same question. Would we ever actually need this fleet? Would there ever come a day when humanity had to fight for its survival among the stars?" He paused and looked around the table. Every commander was listening intently. They'd all grown up hearing stories about Earth's violent past, the world, wars, the natural disasters, the constant struggle just to stay alive on a planet that seemed determined to kill them. Well, that day has arrived. The Arc Beacon has been activated. Commander Rachel Stone raised her hand. She was in charge of the intelligence division, always the first to know about threats from deep space. "Sir, our sources tell us the Galactic Council has already sent peacekeeping ships to handle the situation." Brooks let out a harsh laugh that had no humor in it. "Peacekeepers? Rachel, show everyone what our long-range scanners picked up yesterday." The holographic display changed, now showing a distant star system called Kepler 442. But instead of peaceful planets and trade ships, the screen revealed something terrifying. Hundreds of dark, angular vessels surrounded a small blue world where human colonists had been trying to build new lives. The enemy ships looked like giant metal sharks, with sharp edges and weapon ports covering their hulls. Energy readings showed that their guns were more powerful than anything the peaceful Galactic Council had ever built. "This is the hegemony," Brooks continued, his voice growing colder. "They've been moving through this part of the galaxy for the past 50 years, wiping out entire civilizations. They don't care about surrender. They don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate." Commander Mike Chen, who led the Marine divisions, leaned forward. "What do they want?" "They want to prove they're the strongest species in the universe," Brooks replied. "They pick a planet, surround it, and then kill everyone living there. Men, women, children, it doesn't matter. They do it for entertainment." The room fell silent. These were all experienced military officers who had seen their share of violence. But the idea of wiping out entire worlds just for fun made their blood run cold. Brooks walked closer to the display, pointing at the enemy fleet. That beacon wasn't calling for peacekeepers or diplomats. It was calling for warriors. It was calling for the only species tough enough to fight back against something like this. He turned to face his commanders again. "Every single one of you grew up on Earth. You survived hurricanes, earthquakes, ice ages, and plagues. Your ancestors fought saber-toothed tigers and conquered mountains. You come from a world that tried to kill humanity every single day for millions of years." The officers began sitting up straighter, understanding where this was heading. "The question now is simple," Brooks said, his voice rising. "Are you ready to show the galaxy what Earth's children learned in the cradle of violence? Are you ready to remind the universe why our planet is classified as a death world?" Every commander in the room stood up at once. "Sir, yes sir." The space around Kepler 442 had been quiet for days, with only the slow movement of the hegemony blockade ships circling the trapped human colony. Then, without warning, reality seemed to tear open as the human fleet burst out of hyperspace like a pack of hunting wolves. Admiral Brooks stood on the bridge of his flagship, UES Retribution, watching as his ships took formation around him. The massive battleship had been his home for the past 6 months as the fleet made its way across the galaxy. Finally, they had arrived at their destination. The bridge was buzzing with activity as his crew worked at their stations. These weren't raw recruits. Every person on his ship had trained for years, studying battle tactics that went back thousands of years to humanity's earliest wars. They knew their jobs, and they were ready. "Commander Torres, give me a count on what we're facing," Brooks ordered his tactical officer. Nick Torres was bent over his sensor display, his fingers dancing across the controls as he analyzed the enemy. Positions. He was young for a commander, only 35, but he had one of the sharpest military minds Brooks had ever worked with. "Sir, I'm reading 847 hostile vessels," Torres reported, his voice steady, despite the overwhelming numbers. "They've got the colony completely surrounded. Colonists can't get off the planet." Brooks nodded grimly. The situation was exactly what they'd expected. The hegemony never left survivors. "What about our fleet strength?" "We have 127 ships. Total, sir. All systems are green and ready for combat." Anyone else might have felt despair at those odds, nearly 7 enemy ships for every human vessel. But Brooks just smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. He'd spent his entire career studying how smaller forces could defeat larger ones. Earth's history was full of such battles. "Perfect," he said quietly. "They think they have us outnumbered." He activated the ship-to-ship communication system that connected him to every human vessel in the fleet. "All ships. This is Admiral Brooks. Today, humanity announces itself to the galaxy. Make it count." The response didn't take long. Within minutes, a harsh mechanical voice crackled through the communications system. The sound was unlike anything human, a mix of grinding metal and electronic noise that made everyone on the bridge wince. The alien voice spoke in broken Standard Galactic, the common language used for trade between different species. "Unknown vessels, you will surrender. Immediately, lower your shields and prepare to be destroyed. Resistance is futile." Brooks stood up from his command chair and straightened his dark blue uniform. He'd worn this same uniform for 20 years through countless training exercises and diplomatic missions, but today would be different. Today the galaxy would learn that Earth was no longer hiding. "This is Admiral Thomas Brooks of the United Earth Navy," he replied, his voice carrying clearly through the communication channel. "We are responding to an activated arc beacon distress call. You have exactly 30 seconds to withdraw all forces from this system, or we will consider your presence an act of war against colonies under our protection." The silence that followed lasted only a few heartbeats before the aliens responded. But instead of words, what came through the speakers was laughter. Cold, cruel laughter that sounded like breaking glass mixed with the screams of dying machines. "Deathworlders," the alien voice said, dripping with contempt. "Oh, you pathetic creatures send 127 ships against our mighty armada. You will join your colonist friends in extinction. You will add your bones to our trophy collection." Brooks remained perfectly calm. Even as his crew tensed around him, he'd expected this reaction. Throughout galactic history, most species had evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation and diplomacy solved problems. They couldn't understand a species that had learned to fight just to survive childhood. "Negative," Brooks replied, his voice as steady as if he were ordering coffee. "Prepare to learn why Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world." He cut the communication channel and turned to Torres. Around the bridge, his officers were watching him with expressions of complete trust. They'd followed him across half the galaxy, and they were ready to follow him into battle. "All ships, weapons free," Brooks commanded. "Show them what evolution on a hostile planet creates." Across the human fleet, weapon systems that had never fired in anger began powering up. Missile tubes loaded with warheads designed by a species that had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts. Energy cannons based on technology developed during centuries of warfare. Shield generators built to withstand anything the universe could throw at them. The hegemony had made one critical mistake. They thought numbers were all that mattered in warfare. They were about to learn that humans had spent millions of years proving that assumption wrong. The first shots of the battle lit up space like a deadly fireworks display. Energy beams and missile trails crisscrossed between the two fleets as the hegemony ships opened fire with everything they had. They were confident this would be over. Quickly, after all. They had destroyed hundreds of other civilizations with ease, but the human ships didn't behave like anything the aliens had seen before. Instead of forming neat battle lines or following predictable attack patterns, the Earth. Vessels scattered in all directions like a school of fish avoiding a shark. Some ships dove toward the planet's surface, using the gravity well to slingshot around and attack from unexpected angles. Others disappeared behind asteroids, only to emerge firing from completely different positions. Commander Patricia Williams was leading the boarding operations aboard her assault cruiser when the real fighting began. She had spent 15 years training Marines for exactly this kind of mission. Close combat in alien environments against unknown enemies. "Listen up, people," Williams said over the intercom to her troops. "These aliens think they're apex predators. Because they've been bullying peaceful species for decades, they're about to learn what real predators look like." Her Marines were unlike any soldiers the galaxy had ever seen. They came from a world where survival meant adapting to any situation. Humans who could fight in burning deserts, frozen tundra, underwater caves, or the vacuum of space itself. Every single Marine had ancestors who had survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and countless wars. The first hegemony ship that Williams' team boarded was massive, 3 times the size of any human vessel. The alien corridors were dark and filled with a poisonous atmosphere that would have killed most galactic species instantly. But the human Marines simply sealed their armor and kept moving forward. "They're falling back to the bridge," reported Sergeant Danny Clark, his voice crackling through the comm system as explosions echoed around them. Williams smiled grimly as she watched her tactical display. "Let them run. We'll just cut our way through the hole if we have to." These aliens never learned that sometimes the best path forward is the one nobody expects. She activated her plasma cutter and began burning through a bulkhead that the aliens thought was impenetrable. Within minutes, her Marines were pouring through the hole, attacking the enemy from a direction they never saw coming. Meanwhile, Space Captain Beth Martinez was proving that human creativity in combat was something the hegemony had never encountered. Her destroyer was outnumbered 10 to 1, surrounded by massive alien battleships that should have reduced her ship to scrap metal in seconds. Instead of trying to run or fight conventionally, Martinez did something that violated every rule of space combat her enemies knew. She fired her atmospheric engines, the small thrusters normally used only for landing on planets, and sent her ship spinning directly into the center of the enemy formation. The hegemony ships were so large and unwieldy that they couldn't turn fast enough to track her wild, spiraling movement. Martinez's destroyer danced between their massive hulls like a hummingbird flying through a forest, firing every weapon she had at point-blank range. By the time the alien ships realized what was happening, 3 of their battleships were already crippled and drifting helplessly through space. This scene repeated itself throughout the battle zone. Human ships fought like wild animals backed into a corner, because that's exactly what millions of years of evolution on Earth had taught them to be. Every human captain, every Marine, every pilot drew on instincts that had been shaped by surviving. On the most dangerous planet in their part of the galaxy, the hegemony had built their entire military around the idea that bigger ships and more firepower always won. They formed neat battle lines, followed predictable tactics, and expected their enemies to do the same. But humans had learned warfare from a world that played by no rules at all, Captain. Rodriguez used his ship's mining lasers, never designed for combat, to cut enemy vessels in half. Commander Taylor turned off his ship's artificial gravity and fought a zero-G battle inside an alien hangar bay. Lieutenant Foster jury-rigged his damaged engines to explode like a massive bomb, taking out 5 enemy ships in a single desperate move. Hour by hour, the tide of battle shifted. The hegemony's perfect formations crumbled under attacks that came from every direction at once. Their massive ships, built for intimidation and overwhelming firepower, couldn't handle enemies that refused to fight fair. By hour 12, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in their history, hegemony forces began retreating. From a battle, their commanders, watching their fleets being torn apart by tactics they couldn't understand, gave orders to fall back and regroup, but there was no regrouping from this kind of fight. The human ships pursued them relentlessly, using every trick, every improvised weapon, every desperate strategy that Earth's violent history had taught them. By hour 18, the few surviving hegemony vessels were broadcasting surrender messages. On every frequency they could find, a species that had terrorized half the galaxy was begging for mercy. From 127 human ships, the galaxy would never be the same. The news of humanity's victory at Kepler 442 spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, every species with access to galactic communication networks had heard the impossible story. The hegemony, the unstoppable force that had wiped out entire civilizations, had been utterly defeated by a mysterious species called humans. For 6 months, the Galactic Council debated what to do about this new development. They sent diplomatic messages to Earth requesting meetings and explanations. They analyzed every piece of data they could find about the battle, trying to understand how such a small fleet had accomplished the impossible. Finally, they extended a formal invitation for Earth to join the Council as a full member. Admiral Brooks accepted, but he knew this meeting would determine humanity's place in the galaxy for centuries to come. The Council chambers on Centaura Prime were unlike anything Brooks had ever seen. The building was enormous, a crystalline dome that stretched nearly a mile across, with seating for representatives from over 400 different species. Some delegates looked almost human, while others were so alien that Brooks couldn't even figure out which end was their head. As he walked to the center of the chamber, Brooks felt the weight of thousands of eyes watching his every move. He wore his dress uniform, the same dark blue jacket with gold trim that human naval officers had worn for centuries. But today, it represented more than just Earth's military. It represented humanity's introduction to galactic civilization. Honored delegates, Brooks began, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems so that every being present could hear him clearly. On behalf of Earth and all humanity, I accept the Council's generous invitation to join as a full member. A murmur of approval rippled through the assembled delegates. Many species had waited decades or even centuries to be accepted into the Council. For humans to be offered membership after their first contact was almost unprecedented. However, Brooks continued, raising his hand for silence. We come with certain conditions that must be understood and accepted. The chamber fell silent. This was unexpected. New species typically accepted membership gratefully. Without making demands, Counselor Alex of the Altarian Republic, a tall, blue-skinned being with large black eyes, leaned forward in his seat. What conditions do you speak of, Admiral Brooks? Brooks straightened his shoulders and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. Any species in this galaxy that faces extinction may activate an arc beacon, and Earth's Navy will respond. We will not stand by and allow another hegemony to rise while we have ships to fly and humans willing to crew them. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Hundreds of delegates began talking at once in dozens of different languages. Some sounded excited by the prospect of guaranteed protection. Others seemed worried about what this might mean for galactic politics. The debate raged for nearly an hour before the Council's eldest member called for order. Sage Korthok was ancient even by his species standards, over 800 years old, with memories stretching back to the early days of galactic civilization. When he spoke, even the most argumentative delegates fell silent. Admiral Brooks, the old being, said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, we have studied recordings of your battle with the hegemony. Your species fought with a level of violence and tactical brutality that we have never witnessed in all our years of galactic history. Brooks nodded, not trying to deny the accusation. Korthok continued, yet now you stand before us, offering protection to species you have never met, worlds you have never seen. You offer to risk human lives for complete strangers. Please explain this apparent contradiction. Brooks was quiet for a long moment, thinking about his home world. He remembered the hurricanes that could flatten entire cities, the earthquakes that could split continents, the ice ages that had nearly wiped out early humanity. He thought about the countless predators, diseases, and natural disasters that had shaped his species over millions of years. "Counselor Korthak," he finally replied, "we learned something very important during our long evolution on Earth. The universe is a hostile place. Every single day on our world taught us that survival isn't just about being strong enough to protect yourself. It's about being strong enough to protect those who can't protect themselves." He paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces watching him intently. The strong have a responsibility to shield the weak, not because they're forced to, but because it's the only way any civilization can truly survive and prosper. When the strong prey on the weak, everyone eventually loses. Brooks gestured toward the viewing screens that showed images of the Kepler 442 battle. That arc beacon wasn't calling for conquerors or destroyers, it was calling for guardians. Earth heard that call, and we answered it. We will continue to answer it for as long as we exist. The chamber remained silent as delegates absorbed his words. Finally, Counselor Alex stood up. "All those in favor of accepting Earth's protection pact and granting full membership?" The vote was unanimous. Every single delegate raised their hand, tentacle wing, or whatever appendage their species used to show agreement. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, Brooks activated his personal communicator. The device connected him directly to Earth's military command billions of miles away. "Command, this is Admiral Brooks," he said quietly. "Begin immediate construction of the Guardian fleet. Expand our shipyards and start recruiting more personnel. Humanity just became the galaxy's insurance policy, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next." The age of human isolation was over. The age of human guardianship had begun. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.